Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Beaver, and a couple of weeks ago I did 3 super easy recipes for you to do when you get started in the hobby. Now all 3 of those recipes were very basic and used basic store-bought ingredients. I even took you along on a little shopping trip where I went to go pick up the ingredients that we used, including the nutrients as well as the yeast that we used to make those 3 recipes. If you want to check out that video, I'll put a link up at the top there. You can click through it, or it will be in the description box below, so you can click through and watch that video on the 3 super easy recipes that we used to do this 3 runs. Now each of these recipes will distill slightly different, and that's why I chose those 3 recipes, because each of them will challenge you in a slightly different way when you are distilling, whether it's how you made your cuts or whether it's how your still was running and the type of ABVs you got off the still as you were running it. For me personally, I started with the one with the most delicate flavors, and that will be our fruit wash. Now if you don't remember, we took standard fruit juice. We just checked on the label on the outside so there was no preservatives in it. We dumped all of that fruit juice into a bucket, tested the gravity, and then pitched some yeast and some nutrients, and it fermented out in a couple of days. Now the reason why I start with that specific recipe when I distill is because I'm going to be using the same still, or because I use the same still, this little mini pot still that I have here. Each of those recipes has a different kind of flavor profile, but the fruit has a very delicate flavor profile, and if there was anything else stuck in the still when I did my runs, the contamination might have pulled over and destroyed the flavors of the fruit wash. Now when you do a fruit wash, your main flavors will show up, or the bright good fruit flavors will show up in your heads. So it's very important when you do your cuts, when it comes to the fruit, that you start tasting quite early on when you do your cuts in the heads run. Now if you're going to be doing the fruit wash right at the beginning, keep an eye, start nice and slow. So for fruit, I normally start off really slow, get my drips to come off a little bit of drips at a time, and this will allow me to make a better resolution of cut when it comes to making that transition between heads and hearts. Now for all of the recipes I did take a tiny little bit of heads. So for the fruit wash, we just took a little bit of heads. Now it's normally, or 4 shots and heads. It's a little bit more than I normally take on my big stills, but as I was tasting it, I found that transition point where the bright flavors started picking up, and I started transitioning into very small cuts up until I felt I was into hearts, and I could then do a rolling cut to determine when I start getting closer to tails. Now with the fruit wash, the flavors were right up in the heads, nice bright fruity flavors. It then transitioned into the hearts. The hearts were more cooked and stewed fruits, nice sweet flavors, and then ended in the tails, coming really quickly. The flavor changed drastically, turning into almost like a cement type of smell, as well as became really oily really quickly. So I cut off the run, didn't collect any tails, and we called it hearts. Now for the fruit wash, we ended up with about 500 mils of the fruit wash. It came off the still at the end at about 50% ABV. Now we'll be doing a taste test of each of these at the end of the video, so stick around for that. But yeah, it came off at 50%. Now for the next recipe going into the still, after giving the still a nice good rinse, ensuring that I run some water through the condenser as well as through the head as well as through the boiler at the bottom, just giving it a nice rinse to see if I can pull out any of the flavors out of the still so nothing carries over into the next distillation. I started with the corn. Now the reason once again for going with the corn instead of the last one, which is the rum, this has delicate flavors as well. But unlike the fruit run, this actually started with a nice bright clean flavor, but it had a little bit of a tingling on the side of my tongue, so I kept tasting up until that transitioned out, and I ended up taking a very small cut of heads. Yes, I did discard the 4 shots, but I took a very small cut of heads, and then immediately it transitioned into the nice sugar head whiskey flavors that you normally get when you do a sugar head whiskey. As for the cornflake flavor, yes, the cornflake flavor did show up, but it only showed up quite late in the tails. So I kept on collecting in smaller jars as I felt the hearts run was ending, and I did get some funky corn flavors. But if you're going to go looking for them, be prepared to go looking deep in the tails so that you don't stop your run too early. Now normally when I do a whiskey run, I would run quite deep, unlike with the fruit wash that I stopped quite early in the tails, because I know there's nothing left in the tails of the fruit. Everything normally shows up in the heads and then in the hearts. But for corn or any whiskey type of deal, you're looking for those good robust flavors down in the tails. Now don't leave your jar unattended and expect all the tails to be nice. The tails will start going funky, and then it starts cleaning up again, and then you end up with here and there a little bits of flavor that you can add back into your final product. Now for the corn, it also came off with everything blended back together at about 50% ABV, and we ended up with just below 500 mils, a little bit less than the fruit wash, but still a relatively good run if you compare it to the amount of ABV we had in each of the bucket. Keeping in mind that each of these recipes had about the same ABV going into the pot. Vapor liquid equilibrium should say that we should get the same ABV, but with the rum we had a little bit of a different result. So yeah, we had got about just below 500 mils at 50%. Remember, we did add a little bit of tails in there, so my hard cuts was a bit higher in ABV, but because I put lower ABV tails in, it dropped the overall ABV down to roughly about 50%. Now if you kept track this long, the final recipe that went into our little still over here was the molasses run, or the rum wash. If you paid attention in the previous video, you would have noticed there was a little bit of mint, so it was a mint molasses, and I was expecting the mint to show up quite robustly, but unfortunately it didn't. Now I did take a 4 shots cut as well as a very small heads cut, because I was expecting that mint flavor to show up. It did start showing up, and then I transitioned into my jars so I can start collecting the stuff I want to keep, but the mint didn't stick around. So we only took a very small heads cut on that run, roughly about 50 mils, not a lot, but we did get that mint just to show up for a little bit. But as the run went on, the mint disappeared almost immediately, and we ended up with quite a good run, if I have to say that, because the rum run we collected a little bit less, but we got it off at 60% ABV. Now the tail started showing up on the rum quite quickly, as well as it didn't clear up. Now I do run my runs a little bit deeper into tails than I do with fruit, but no new flavor showed up. It just started going into that cardboardy, wet cardboard kind of smells, and it never cleaned up, so there was nothing in the tails I could use. And as you can see, it is slightly cloudy, so we did pull some tails in the actual hearts run, but it was quite a clean run all the way through. But we did end up with 60% ABV and roughly about 470 mils, so not a bad result, quite a good run. Now let's quickly pop over to the other side of the studio. We're going to taste all 3 of these and give you my tasting notes on each of these different recipes. Now, similar to the distilling, I'm going to taste these in order. So we're going to start with the delicate flavors first, and we're going to move down to the robust rum flavors. So first up, we have our fruit wash. Now this is straight 50% as it was taken off the still. So on the nose, it is quite fruity. You get that strawberry and berry kind of mixture, similar to what you got when you opened up the fruit juice for the first time. It does have a sweet nose. It does have a tiny bit of ethanol hit on it. Remember, we did take a quite high up in the heads cut. So the ethanol hit is expected. As for the flavor, now for the flavor, it is closer to dried fruit. It doesn't have that fresh bright fruit flavors. As I'm speaking, those bright flavors are coming through, but it is very muted in the sense that it is more dried fruit kind of deals, like a fruit roll-up. So it does have that sugary sweet characteristics. Let's quickly drop a couple of drops of water into this and see if we can't expose some more flavors. So immediately, just dropping a few drops of water into it, we are getting a more fruity, floral note coming through. The dried fruit is more prominent on the nose now as well. So let's give it a quick taste. Yeah, so double down on the dried fruit. The florally, fruity type of deal comes through right at the end. But it's still very sweet. But yeah, quite good. Let's move on to the corn. Now the corn, as expected, it has a very sugar heavy hit on the front. So it does have a little bit of the corn flavor hidden right at the back behind that ethanol sugar bowl kind of deal. Little bit of ethanol in the back. It's a lot softer on the nose than the fruit, because remember, we didn't take that big of a cut in the heads. So on the taste, it hits you with the grain flavor that you don't pick up in the nose. So that cornflake flavor is definitely there. But remember, I had to go hunting for it in the tails. But ended up giving you a nice, clean smelling product. I do believe this should be distilled twice rather than just the one pot still distillation, because it does have a little bit of a funk to it that tends to linger even during aging, that you don't want in an end product. So if you're ever going to do a cornflakes wash, rather double the wash, double distill it, or strip it and then redistill it, so you can actually remove some of that funk, and you should end up with a relatively good product. Now this is not super delicious to smell, nothing wrong with it, but it does have a little bit of a funk to it. And on the taste as well, it ends up with a little bit of a straw note rather than a corn note that you want. And I think that should distill out once you do a double distillation. Last but not least, the rum. Now I'm excited to taste this. I haven't tasted it yet, so I want to see if that mint actually comes through in the distillation, because it didn't come through while I was tasting coming off the still, but it was little bits at a time. So maybe over the whole run we did get a couple of those minty flavors to pull through. So on the nose, it's not a very rum forward rum, so the molasses we used is closer to a treacle, maybe a treacle 2 rather than a black strap, giving you less of that molasses or aniseed hit. It does have a slight little bit of a ketchup smell to it. Don't know where that comes from. Well, on the taste, it is definitely a rum. You can taste that molasses licorice kind of taste to it. There is no mint that I can find, maybe because it's a little bit of a bubblegum type of mint flavor coming through, but right at the end. So yeah, let's thin it down. Remember, this is at 60%, so let's drop a couple of drops of water in here and see if it cleans up a little bit. So first thing that comes out when I diluted it down was the rum flavors popped right to the surface. As I said when I showed you the jars, it is a tiny bit cloudy, so we did pull a little bit of the oils in during the tails, but the rum came through quite nicely now. Yeah, and on the taste, completely rum. No mint whatsoever. Like I said, maybe a little bit of a bubblegum minty flavor, but no mint whatsoever. So I was hoping that maybe we can get a little bit of a mint flavor in there. Should lend itself quite nicely to a gin base, so similar to the gin rummy that I did. But yeah, a very pleasant rum, should age quite nicely. That tomato sauce or almost vinegary like type of flavor completely disappeared now after I proofed it down. So yeah, quite nice. Now if you tried any of these recipes, please give me some feedback down below in the comment section on what you picked up, keeping in mind the little tips I gave on where to go looking for flavors as you were running your still. So yeah, give me some feedback down in the comment section below. If you want me to do more of these simple recipes, please put it down in the comment section and I'll develop a couple more of these super simple recipes and do a small batch and distilling. If you want to see more on that actual distilling side of the recipes, please let me know. But if you stuck around this far, thank you very much for watching and have a lacquer day.